Board of Selectmen's meeting, August 19.
It's up to you whether you want one or not.
Okay, I'm just gonna grab mine. I didn't even think of it.
So Bob had a little problem, he got went to a family reunion and come home with it, so he was quarantined for a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, Bob? Yeah, so I had to sit next to him, so, not that I don't like the guy, I just wanna make sure that, the Lone Ranger has his mask on.
Well, I'm full of them. Marks are still in today, Mike.
I know you're full of something, but wasn't sure what it was.
That and the other stuff after getting that tooth pulled this morning.
Yeah. Ready?
Yeah.
Stand, call the meeting order. Colonel, lead us in the pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Colonel.
All right. Big thing today is old business is the General Sullivan Bridge update reply agreement. And that's the first item there on the handling. We responded to that, right, Martha, in June, after we had the public hearing. We were all there, and we said that because of well, I'll read the letter to Ms. Bressick. It does not appear the town can agree to fund the necessary transfer of Bloody Point to Newington. The income for the sale of Bloody Point and training people, our customer estimate is $470,000 to $520,000. Although we believe in this housing market we could treble that price, should the town for use to rehabilitate historic resources of Newington, because New Hampshire DOT will be saving millions of dollars by not renovating the General Sullivan Bridge, and will not be making over $1 million selling one of the oldest and most historic parts of Newington and eliminating the public access to Bloody Point. Then the existing more than 400 years is only just that the funds should be returned to the town due to this charge. Thank you for your consideration, the Board of Selectmen.
So the board has gone on record telling DOT that you expect the income from the sale of Bloody Point to come back to the town to rehabilitate another historic resource.
Right.
And they have given you the memorandum of agreement that doesn't say anything about that.
What's the difference?
If you look at page, I believe it was 5, it just goes back to the discussion about $150,000 in item C, actually on page 6, item C. But it doesn't talk about the sale and rehabilitating a town property at all.
What's your recommendation?
That we stick by our guns regarding your original memo of June, but we do have Lulu here.
Yeah. And
Why do they not make mention of how much they're spending on Dover's rail trail? There's never a dollar figure on the Dover rail trail, but yet
they refer to it all the time.
they're sticking to their guns on the 150,000 watt. I'd like to know from DOT, can you ask them how much are they spending on this Dover rail trail? The way I look at it, the town line is in the middle of the bridge.
We don't have a state senator because of that.
Take out a couple.
Yeah, I know they do.
I will find out.
Thank you.
Lowell?
I agree with you, Bob.
The memorandum that you have before you is the same one that's been being worked on now for months. So the reason you don't have any replies to the letter that you just sent in is that they're still tweaking all of the language in the existing memorandum. Now, one of the sections, and I don't have it in front of me, says that at a point in time, the property will be offered to Newington. And that might either be to the town or to the Historic Society. And if those entities refuse, then the next part says they would sell it. And this has been the same now going on for well over a year. If they sell it, I have asked them in the past that the town get that money, but right now, that money would be kept by DOT. So that part, that provision, I think their feeling is they're gonna offer it to you, and if you don't want it, then they're gonna sell it and keep the money. That's the way that part's written.
I would suggest we don't sign it.
I didn't hear you, what you say?
I suggest we don't sign it.
So to give you some feedback on that, I've asked them what happens if you don't sign it, and it doesn't matter. Because the real signatories to the memorandum are the three people, the federal person from the Federal Highway Agency or whatever it is, the Division of Historic Resources, and DOT. I asked them why you were categorized as, what's the name, a
Concurring party.
concurring party. I said, what's a concurring party? For instance, the Woodman Museum, if
Yeah.
they get material from the bridge and they're going to set up an educational exhibit in the museum, signs that because they agree that, yes, that's what they're going to be doing. If the selectmen sign it, then it's like, yes, this offer will be made to the town, and that's what you're signing for. But I asked them what happens if they won't sign it, and they said it doesn't really matter. The process
They're gonna do
will
what they damn
continue.
please.
That's what they're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
But put that aside for a minute, and let me ask a fundamental question. What are you thinking about the depot and the property? I mean, when you just read that letter, that basically, I interpret it as saying if I was the state, if I was DOT, if I was Concord, DHR, I'd interpret it as you don't care about the property, you don't care about the preservation of the building or public access to the water. You're really looking at it as we can make some money, so if there's money to be made, we want to have the money. Is that what you meant to say to them? Because I think
We can't afford, what we said to them, we can't afford the property.
that's, you said at the beginning, taking on another. If someone could give me a copy of the letter, I'd appreciate it. I'm still wearing multiple hats here.
Yeah, I
because
know
we
you're
still
in an
have-
awkward position, but, you know,
Thanks.
we just can't afford that piece of property as it sits now, and even if they give you $150,000, is, you know, like you're giving a kid a dime for an ice cream cone. They're not gonna get it, and they're just gonna look and cry. We can't do anything with $150,000, and $150 won't even envelope the building, will not take care of the waterfront deterioration, won't clean it up or anything else. I mean, and with all the land that Newington has, between Fox Point, the forest, and all the other pieces of property, that we really don't properly take care of all of them now. I fiscally, personally, and I think that's where the board made the decision, we can't put this burden on the taxpayers.
All right, so,
I
And
mean,
that's
my
what you-
speaking I'll ask if there's, you know,
Exactly the way I feel.
so that's exactly the message I got from you back in April.
Right,
Yeah.
it hasn't changed, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on then to the next step, because the Newington Historic Society has asked to be Newington in terms of that memorandum of understanding in the event that the town, which is you guys, selectmen, say that you're not interested in the property. Now, we've been talking to several people about how that might happen. And there's multiple vehicles that could happen. And we also have multiple people, the Preservation Alliance has said they will help us with grants, with LCHIP funding. The people in DHR have been working with Jim Garvin, the state historian. to see if some immediate work can be done on the building to keep the weather out for another 2 years. Helen Frank has offered to write the grants that are needed. Senator Waters said that there has been a federal program for shoreline restoration, and because New Hampshire has so little shoreline, that bridge abutment area would definitely qualify for that kind of federal grant money. So there's multiple things that can be put in place to try to save the property for public access, for a public park, and for reuse of the building. The Historic Society is not a public entity. So the charitable trust unit in Concord is working to see what vehicle could be put in place, which would be a public entity, that the Historical Society could monitor, could manage. And there's multiple ways to do that. All of these trusts, when conservation land is bought, when development rights are bought, those are all managed by a trust. Those trusts can be managed by nonprofits. Or you can have public-private partnerships where you enter into a private arrangement, and which would be the Historic Society and a public entity.
So what are you suggesting, what's your suggestion?
So the question I asked back to you guys is, if your primary interest is because you don't want to burden the taxpayer with more property to maintain and funds they have to raise, are you still willing to work with the Historic Society to see if we can put in place something to protect that particular area? Because the goal would be to have it as a public park, to have it as a museum that people could, say they want to have a venue there, a wedding or a graduation or whatever, and to make the second floor a living unit where the old toll keeper used to live, in order to pay for the long-term maintenance of the building. Plus, to do all of the work, to write the grants, to work with these preservation agencies and the federal government to get as much free money as we possibly can get over a period of like 8 or 10 years.
I was gonna say, it'd be 10 years, yeah.
Now, why does anybody want to do that? From Lula's perspective, I'll just throw out one comment. 10 years ago, we had a falling down barn. And you look at it and it scares the shit out of you when you look at the barn and you think of the amount of time and effort that it's going to take to fix it. It's easily 5 times bigger than a railroad depot. And the trick to doing it is you take one step at a time, one project at a time, and you get that done. 5 years later, nobody can tell because you've done all of the foundation work and the roof. But after a period of time, the building is renovated, it's better than it's ever been, and it has a new life. So these projects are doable. It just takes a committed group of people who care about the property in order to do it. And you guys are in the position to make, if you honestly don't want it, which is what it sounds like you're saying, you guys are in the position to at least make it easy for another group to do it, rather than to throw hurdles in the way of another group.
But the question, if you're asking us to accept that with 150,000, it leaves us liable to take care of that building, whether the people can do it or not, then that's the other concern I have.
You're jumping the gun. The timeline, right, today it's just a memorandum of understanding.
Right.
But the timeline is going to be at least another 18 months to 2 years before the offer is even made to the town or to the Historic Society. They've got to do a building assessment, they have to do a land reuse, they've got to finish going through all of
They just can't transfer the property, I know that.
So you won't even have to make a final decision.
Right.
It's not tomorrow.
So it's time for us to also think about what you're suggesting and go with that in our heads to see if there's something we can work with here. Like I said, my concern, like Teddy says, is burden on the taxpayer, but if there's a group that wants to come forward to work on it, my only thing is, what's the guarantee that they'll follow through what they're saying they wanna do and not leave the town with a building that we can't do nothing with and have to take care of it and run into a $1 million problem?
Well, the answer to that is the vehicle that accepts the property.
Right.
If the Historic Society is Newington and accepts the property, they're completely independent from the town. They're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that would be working with these other trusts or granting agencies. The Historic Society would have all of the responsibility to follow through on a commitment.
But the question is,
If they fell flat on their face,
Yes.
what would happen? A lot of trust agreements, even the Newington Neighbor, all of these, even the Historic Society itself, if it goes out of business, you have to put into those agreements who gets the assets of that organization.
yes, that
It
was my
can't be
question.
the directors, it can't be the
Right.
board
And if
members.
it's deeded to the town, it's gonna belong to the town.
It will not be deeded to the town if it goes to the Historic Society in a trust or in a
Okay,
partnership.
if it's in a trust, that you may be right, I'm not sure on that, but most of the time, deeds transfer tell you what you can and can't do with property, okay? And if the deed says it's gonna go to whatever group it wants to go to, that group is basically on the hook to take care of what they said they were gonna do. And you know and I know with this COVID world we live in today, God knows we're all gonna be here tomorrow, or not, who knows? This thing all of a sudden falls apart, our children growing up are gonna be stuck with something that we can't do something with, and that was our concern. And in the long run, I mean, in the long range, I understand and I sympathize with it, but I don't see it cost-wise smart for the town to do that. That's why I support Teddy and Bob on that, and also Mr. Latcher at the time, because I don't wanna see the town be strapped with something they can't make any revenue with, and they have to maintain it. As it is now, it was my responsibility to get these buildings up and stuff and all that, and they cut shots for my money, you can't fix the ceiling tiles in that room in there because I don't have the money, but just the idea of somewhere along the line that can happen to you, and that's what I'm concerned about, is if the funds dry up somewhere.
I think you have to look at it the same way you would look at the Southeast Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, these other organizations, many of which are nonprofit organizations or however they're structured.
Right.
They enter into these agreements in Newington where they own whatever that easement is.
Right. Well,
You're not responsible for what they have to do. The
Well, it
town
happened
is
in
not
Portsmouth too, it's
responsible.
called Strawberry Bank, and at the time it was not gonna be occupied for residential units. They found out in the infancy of their smarts that there was not enough money to do what they needed to do the project, and they almost went belly up, so they had to start renting them out, which again was subsidized housing, they didn't do it right, I'm not only I'm just saying, so those things have to be really set in stone, if not, it runs to a huge problem, you know?
Let me put your mind at ease. In that memorandum of understanding, one of the things I was able to get in it is that the building only has to be maintained to the state it's in now or better.
Okay,
In now, it's in a tumble down,
Right.
terrible state. And so if $150,000 puts the shell of the building in a weatherproof condition so it will last another 20 years, that's all that needs to be done.
okay,
When we talk about trying to make it a park or put a rental unit in there or
Yeah.
long-term,
yeah,
that's as you go over the next 8 to 10 years and you continue to get granting money or
Right.
federal money.
now, how
to
you,
do
how,
it.
how you deal with the zoning up there, you can't have 2 residential units in one lot, according to this planning department. If you had a residential unit in that, toll booth, and you have one up over that building, there's 2 on one lot, and I don't think you'll be allowed to do that.
That's not, the idea is to keep the whole bottom as a museum for public access. So if somebody had a birthday party or a wedding, and they wanted to say, we want to use that building, there'd be public bathrooms eventually in the bottom, and the museum area would be open. And they could put their tent or whatever they wanted. So any residential aspect would just be in an upstairs apartment.
But you also said you're talking about possible rental in the rental unit in the old toll booth that was down there.
It's only one, it's only one.
There's only
It's
one unit?
building.
I thought there was two there.
No,
Oh,
it's just.
I stand corrected, and I'm sorry, I thought there was two buildings there.
But
And
you
the-
know, well, this has been kicked around for numerous years,
Yeah.
and there's been talk of it, but none of these so-called nonprofits or anything have ever approached the town and said, would you party with us, would you work with us, or anything else? Nothing. And now at the last minute, we really don't have any group here, to come in here and make a proposal to us. That's
Ted, I
kind
don't
of
know
scary.
how much more.
Not, you're not scary, the thing that there's nobody else, it's a party to this.
Maybe I should be scary.
Will tells me you are, but I'm not gonna believe him.
Yeah, believe him, he's gotta live with me. Ted, I've worked in good faith for 2 years thinking the town wanted the property. It wasn't until April, for the first time, I got the feedback that there was no interest.
And you at that time said, if the town has no interest, it's okay with me, do with it what you may.
No, I didn't. I said the selectmen have to start talking for themselves. Because I have been talking for 2 years, wearing two hats. A consulting party with the HBC, which is one of the only federally mandated things an HDC can do, is be a consulting party to protect historic resources. And I was wearing the hat representing the Board of Selectmen, which I did for 2 years up until I got the very first feedback from the board that you weren't interested. We still have a time to work together over the next 18 months. But I can tell you the way all of that machinery in Concord works, they all know each other, they all talk to each other.
No question about it.
No question about it, and when they get a letter like this that says, basically, we want the money, but with no commitment to the land or the building, it sends a message to them that the selectmen in the town are not interested in. Only then do they become more interested in helping an organization like the Historic Society.
The DOT screwed us all over the place.
Yeah, it's-
Well, yeah,
And,
the
you know, it's
FAA
been going on for
and the
years.
DOT and, I mean, yes.
The individuals, the personality, the agency.
Let's face it, the $150,000 is a drop in the bucket for what that land is worth out there. Seriously, think about that, okay? Now, I understand where you're coming from, and I sympathize with you. But again, I don't wanna, my personal thing is, I don't wanna set the town in a position where we have to carry something for 10, 20 years until we get things done. And I agree that maybe a committee could be put together and maybe research it out and do it that way. But the fact of the matter is, how long is it gonna take, who's gonna come up with the money, who's gonna lead that? And God forbid, good Lord takes you tomorrow, then what the hell do we do? Okay? That's my
It wouldn't
concern.
be your problem if the good Lord takes me tomorrow and, you know, the rest of the committee would have to decide what they wanna do or
Right.
drop it. But here's some facts that you guys need to know. The $150,000 was meant to be a 50% matching grant to an LCHIP grant for another $150,000. So I believe we've got the first $300,000 that we're going to be able to get. Whether the selectmen got it or whether the Historic Society got it.
Mhm.
The next thing is when they assessed the 2.3 acre value of the property,
Mhm.
because if the state declares it surplus and it does have to be sold, they have to have a value on it.
All right,
That's where they came up with that like $700,000, $800,000 number.
which I disagree with the value, but go ahead.
Then we said to them, you can't do that because it wouldn't meet any of the zoning requirements of
Correct.
the town of Newington. It needs to have the road frontage in order to satisfy the zoning requirements. They are talking about adding another portion of that property to the 2.3.
Well, that's news to me, I didn't know that, okay.
Well, that's still what's all of these negotiations are
Mhm.
about. That means that the cost of that surplus land is going to be more than the 800,000.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that money, Peter has to pay Paul. Within the turnpike system and the DOT and wherever their money comes from the state, they have to dig into their pocket and come up with a minimum of $800,000 or more to one element to buy that property from the other. Now, that all is going to have to be paid for under this historic mitigation process, probably with federal money, federal earmarked money. So when you ask the question, which I've asked them, what is Dover giving? You know, how much does it cost to do all of these other studies? You know, what
Good point.
are you giving
Very
Newington?
good point.
I've been told Newington's getting the lion's share of the mitigation money. And it all centers on that Peter paying Paul element, that somewhere within that DOT system, they've got to come up with the cost, the fair market value price of that property. And I've kind of said to them, well, that's fine, that's all between you, and you've got to do it anyway because it's part of this historic mitigation that you have to do. But it is still real money to them. So when they talk about what it's costing them to put this proposal to Newington, it's $150,000 plus a couple of minor studies, plus, you know, $1 million for property. I don't trust DOT, and you have to argue every step of the way with them. But when you throw in the towel and you say, then you lose and you double lose. But nobody wants to spend time still arguing. But and the feeling I'm still getting from all of you guys is you're not interested in that property because you're afraid the town would be taking on a fiscal responsibility that you do not want.
This is the bottom line, I'm not speaking for the whole board, but I think that's the essence right now, with all the properties that we do have and have to maintain, and taking on that property.
He's absolutely right, and this last go-round budget, the budget committee took $20,000 out of money to fix the buildings. It's cut my legs on it again. So I can't fix the French drains in this building and fix the leaks in this building. You know, it's just what I'm dealing with.
I'm not arguing with you, but I'll honestly tell you, you make it easier for the Newington Historic Society when you come out strongly with that position, which is fine by me. But what it basically does is it says in that memorandum of understanding, Newington can either be the town or Newington can be a Newington nonprofit historic society
But
that
we have
has
to-
a public
Do
trust.
we vote on that, or do we go to a town meeting and vote on that?
If you refuse it on behalf of the town, then I have asked them, and they seem very willing to do it, in part based upon these letters that you
Mhm.
sent to them,
Right.
to say, yes, we will help the Newington Historic Society in what needs to be done
But
to
the
get the
question
money to
is,
do it.
the question is, I don't feel comfortable making that decision without the townspeople being behind this. So when we go to a town meeting in March and go to warrant articles and support this, is what I'm saying to you. If that's the right way to go, I'm not sure, but I'm just saying. I know we have the right to refuse it,
Yeah,
but I feel more comfortable if the town was behind us on this, because I don't wanna say, this is a bad idea, because this, and this, and half the town, or three-quarters of the town says, what are you doing? We want that, we want to historically fix it, and we'll get a committee together to do it. Then they say they're online, then they're responsible for what they do with the building.
see, that's why when we met in April, I asked, would you set up a committee to talk about potential reuse of the building? What could be, the purposes of the building? Those questions about who would be responsible for what, and more importantly, where's the money going to come from? I think we still have a period of time to work together to figure out in Newington's best interest, how do we save that piece of property? That document, however, tomorrow, the Newington Historic, well, wearing two hats again, I had two hats, Historic Society and Selectmen. You now have the Selectmen hat back. I'm still wearing the Historic Society and District Commission hat. Our interest is preserving the historic property, the historic building, the public access to the property, and we still will be making the argument that says if the selectmen do not want it on behalf of the town, we want to accept it as the Newington entity. Now, we can put that in the response and we can send it off to Concord. We all still have a year to 2 years to figure out what makes sense for everybody.
I feel comfortable we get some legal help on that, because I'm not so sure that that's really kosher in my head, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer the question, but I think an attorney should review that stuff.
You, absolutely, I mean, you have access to attorneys I do not have access to.
I understand that.
And I mean, I'm surprised, you haven't talked to an attorney yet about the transfer, about that property? Have you, yeah. But again, it comes down to mostly you're afraid of the money coming.
I'm afraid of the state, the way they've treated us, to kick us around like a tin can for the last 20, 30 years on that property.
And they're not easy to deal with, you know that, Lou. And they're not very fair with us neither.
But you know what,
I
honest
can't
to
shake
God,
hands
you
with somebody
guys,
like that.
I love you guys, but I'm gonna tell you, it's not been easy working with you either. And you probably say it's not been easy working with you either, Lulu. We're all doing the best we
No,
can.
I would never say that. I like talking with you, and I like to converse back and forth.
Absolutely,
No problem with
you
that.
know,
No problem at all with that.
we took on a fiscal, in my opinion, we took on a responsibility to run the town in the best interest, in the
Correct.
most frugal and economic way. And my opinion for frugality and watching the assets of the town and taking care of it, this is a burden. And I just, you know, we're all zeroing in on the historic building here, but we have to look at the historic taxes that come into this town from the utility companies, from the malls, from the businesses, the commercial and the residential. And we're running into hard times. We spent a day this week in mediation with one company trying to come up with an equitable tax. We've got suits coming at us from the majority, the biggest taxpayer in town, who wants a big cut. We're trying to balance to keep Newington the great town that it is with a low tax rate. But it's getting more and more difficult because of the demands on the town and the demands of the services that the people want, they think they want, but they don't really know what they want, but that's another argument. So that's what I'm looking at, is the fiscal balance here.
We've been dealing with abatements, if I may, for over, I forget how long a period now, but it's just swamps the hell out of my brain at night, because I'm laying awake at 3 o'clock in the morning saying, why can't these understand that this is not gonna work the way they want it, they just wanted everything their way. And just, you know, it's hard to negotiate with some of these people. But we're talking millions of dollars, Lou, that's a lot on your tax rate, a lot on your tax rate.
But see, I understand, it's your decision to make, and I understand that. You wear the fiscal hat, I don't.
Right.
I wear the historic resource
Yeah.
protection.
And thank you for that, we
So,
appreciate it.
well,
And we understand where you're coming from on that too. It's just-
I think, let's put the next 5 years behind us and say, where are we sitting? We're sitting with a property in town that is owned by some public entity managed by the Historic Society that keeps the land open as a park for people to use. Public access to one of the oldest parts of New Hampshire is maintained. Townspeople can have access to the building. The building's gonna pay for itself because there's a rental unit, and somebody gets to live there. And it's a small unit, so you've got workforce housing most likely. in that building. And it's not gonna cost the selectmen a dime, because I honestly don't think DOT is going to sell the property and give you guys the money.
But there's a lot of ifs and buts in there
But if they
too.
sell the property,
We'll go to
private
court.
entity, it could go on the tax rolls.
Right, exactly.
It's a piece of waterfront property that's
Yeah.
in a, I don't know if it's commercial, but it's a business area.
It's water,
That
waterfront
would
zone.
yield a sizable, but we're not talking, we're trying to talk about,
See, I think that's what scares Concord, because 30 years ago, when this same thing was being discussed with the then Board of Selectmen, the town had the opportunity to take that property over, own it, and just maintain the building the same way the states maintained it. And the selectmen wrote a letter to DOT, which they fished out of their files and quoted, that said, we want the land, but we're gonna tear down the building. And that brought the whole process to a screeching halt, because the signatory to these MOAs includes the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources. And the director said, no, we can't put a historic property and building and give it to those guys. So,
we can't keep maintaining an abandoned building or all, but that is a high fire hazard, and it could be a health hazard to the community either.
can I ask one question, and this is just one of the things I saw that made me shake my head and say I don't understand the selectmen. On that April meeting, when I came in and heard from you guys, you were not interested in the depot for those reasons, and because it was gonna cost the town money. That very same meeting, you approved the almost $400,000 conservation easement on the Knox property. There is money in this town that is being raised and spent to buy development rights to keep other people from building houses in town. Lots of money. Every year, at least another $100,000, $150 goes into their capital reserve fund for that purpose. But you let all of these other properties go unmanaged with no money, not even $20,000 to do repairs. Doesn't that seem like you guys are only addressing a piece of the problem? There's money in town. There's money being
I
raised.
disagree with you, because we argued like hell with Eversource to get you $20,000 for up the historic area up there, so I would say you're a little off on that one.
Yeah, I'm glad you argued for
And
the
I
$20,000.
like hell, they didn't wanna give us a dime, I wanted 50 grand, they only gave us 20, so, you know.
Well, we're going to be
Well,
spending.
and, you know, I don't know, I think we should just bring this to a head. I mean, we could sit here, we're having a very friendly discussion but I don't think we're coming any closer to agreeing on it.
No, all we've shared is where each party is coming from.
Right.
Nobody's hiding anything
No,
from anybody
no,
else.
absolutely not.
Everybody knows what's
Yeah,
going
The
on.
cards are all face up on the table, you know, nobody's trying to pull any wool over anybody's eyes on this.
No.
I just can't see that I'm gonna move from my stance on this. I don't know, what do we, kind of a motion do we need, just to put the,
I guess the continuation of your previous
this letter,
stance.
the letter of, whatever it was back here.
Just
June
reconfirming our stance,
27.
yeah, just
Yeah.
reaffirming our stance on the letter we sent you previously.
Right.
Keep it short and sweet, you know, I know that what they wanna do with it, and, you know, and I agree with Lulu in some points, but a lot of points, too many ifs, ands, and buts for me, because I've seen it done at Strawberry Bank, and what they've totally changed some of the stuff they've done down there, so.
Well,
I lived in there, Teddy, you know that, I lived in there and stuff.
Time dictates change, and.
Yeah, life changes, you know.
70 years since this first started, so, but I mean, I can understand some of it, but, you
Yeah.
know, we're faced with something right today.
Right.
The only thing I might suggest is that you say in the Newington section of the memorandum of understanding, you want a provision that if the property is sold by the state, the money comes to the town.
Absolutely.
Now, when I was still wearing the selectman hat, I put that in a
Mhm.
letter
I
that they
recall
already
that,
have.
yeah.
but it's good for you to reaffirm.
We're gonna do that,
if That's
absolutely.
part of what you want
That's
that.
plan- that's our
memorandum
plan
of
was.
understanding.
Fine.
However, I'm gonna argue otherwise.
Oh,
But that's what you guys should be doing.
And God bless you for doing it.
So-
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before I leave, because I'm here, we're getting the money and contractors at the old parsonage.
Yeah,
It looks like, we can put in the HVAC, system, that's about $9,800. We've got electricians that are looking at that now to give a quote. They might give a quote on a humidifier, depending upon how much that's gonna cost. But we're trying to get all of that in the works, with Kevin's help. And DHR so far has said to us that because we're protecting the plaster on the walls and doing everything right and hiding the condenser so nobody can see it, that they're not raising any objection, so far to that, so.
well, I would think you need to.
And we have to run, Dennis, we have to run that to somebody in the state, right?
Nadine Miller from New Hampshire DHR said in the agreement when we were negotiating with them, that a requirement was that prior to spending that money, that they had to get permission from New Hampshire DHR in writing
Right.
to the selectmen.
Once we get all the proposal and everything, then we'll submit it to them and
Right.
get the blessing.
I
DHR,
already
Dennis?
have most of
Sir?
them.
DHR,
New Hampshire DHR, Nadine Miller. And she has a boss, I don't know, I can't remember her boss name, she was on the SEC.
thank you.
No, okay, Nadine Miller is the person. I've been in contact with Nadine, she's the one that's been giving the
Yeah.
approvals. In the Pamela Moore, is that her name?
I
At
think
the
so, yep.
SEC. She sent me a letter that said, you need to speak to Nadine, about the expense of the money. And we were supposed to, after we get that approval, get just a notification to the SEC that that's how the money's gonna be spent and the DHR has approved it. The Pamela is no longer there. They sent me the new name of whoever the person is. Is it Judy or Jody or somebody? They sent me the new name, and said, no, you need to send, the
Yeah.
final approval to Nadine.
Yeah, you have to get the approval though from, in writing from New Hampshire DHR. If we don't, and they warned us, I was right there listening to it, that we could be on the hook if we spend it without their prior approval.
Yeah, so I've just said,
Yeah, I remember you saying
Nadine
that
has
to us
already
before,
said that everything is looking good right now. So-
Okay.
So she's okayed the HVAC installation.
Gotta get a letter in writing what you're
Yes,
doing
I
with it
know.
specifically,
Right.
not just we're preserving the plaster on the wall, you gotta say what the reasons and how it's going, because they didn't wanna go along with, they said, we wanna see a specific thing that is gonna be done to preserve the look of the village, that's what they're looking for.
And so what Nadine has said right now, so far, contacting her this week, things are looking good.
All right, we'll follow
until-
up on that, make sure that we get all the proper documentation and send letters to the approval. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Sorry.
thank
Thank
you.
you for being the bodyguard today.
Okay, so we need a motion. Right, Martha?
Yes, a motion to reaffirm the Board of Selectmen's letter to DOT dated June 27th. I don't have the email anymore, but Rebecca,
That's
I
all right.
do.
And do we have to add the
Yeah,
caveat?
June 18, I'm
Do we
sorry.
have to add the caveat that she just mentioned? Just slipped my mind now for a second and come back.
The
The approval
historic-
on the air conditioning?
No, the historic district, that
If it's sold, we want the money.
help,
Yes,
we're-
I
Yeah,
have that,
that's
put in
it.
the letter
Thank you,
about the
Bob.
money from the sale
That's
to the
it, that's what I was
tenant.
looking
Got it.
for, okay, that's fine, I'll make the motion then.
Second discussion, all in favor? Okay,
Which I thought we had already told them that if they were selling it, we
We
wanted
did,
the
Oh, we
money.
did
and it's
too.
right in the
Yeah.
letter, right.
Okay.
okay, the other one, Hannah Lane, and you're going out on that one.
Yes, at 2 o'clock. Does the
Okay.
board have any thoughts on that? You see my memo that I had had a chance to talk with Bob about it, and we believe that if the slope is reduced on the house side of the trench
Mhm.
so that someone can mow it, Mrs. Abbott will be satisfied?
I wanna hear directly, I don't think Blanche will come out, cause I think she's got some health issues, but her daughter Amy will be there. I'd like to hear exactly what she wants. before we even offer reducing the slope. Let's let her tell us what she wants. I just wanna make sure that this thing, what's a nice way of putting it? We wrap
Come
it,
back and put this in here.
we wrap this up and everyone's happy. I will say that when the digging started, when Marassa started down there the first morning, Blanche was not happy. Across the street, Jamie and John were not happy. They didn't feel as they were notified, and I specifically asked, I believe it was the night before, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, if they were notified.
And I, of course, we all stood in that circle back in February and talked about the details, and I asked Eric Weinreb, did we give everyone a copy of that plan? He said, Martha, we not only gave people the plan of the subdivision, but of the old plan, so they had 2 sheets of paper, and I don't know who.
Well, I will tell you, Blanche's, and
Go, you record.
Okay.
Let's-
Yeah.
yep, Blanche has me on email and she'll call. She is adamant that we have taken action to satisfy one person in town, not a lot of people in town. So, but thank you for that. But, I just wanna make sure that, I think Marassa did a great job. I think it looks good, it's functioning. I just checked it today when it was raining hard. The water is flowing the way it's supposed to be flowing. And, but the basic problem is, it's not a Hannah Lane problem, it's a Nimble Hill drainage problem. The water comes from the church, all the way down the hill, and from Liatos' property and the other property there, I forget who the owner is.
It's all right down there.
And it all winds up there. And, bottom line is, John Frink has got to understand that we can slow the water down, but water is gonna go where water wants to go, and water runs downhill. So, but my goal for today with Blanche is to make sure that the Abbotts are happy. I think,
We're gonna meet next Monday, is it? Next Monday, the next regular meeting. And just come back with a report at that
Yeah, if
time.
you would let us know.
Yeah.
And,
I think she started down the road of, well, when the town put the pipe across, that they abandoned the ditch, so therefore she could fill it in and Cliff could fill it in. And I told her that's not the way legally it works.
Well, we want the parties the best we can to be happy what we're doing, but we've got to resolve the water flow on that road because it's dangerous.
Yep.
And that was the reason why we did it, so thank you for, stepping up and see if you can mitigate with Mrs. Adam, anybody else.
all right, we'll wait for a report back on that at the next meeting. Any new
Right.
business, Martha, to bring up today?
Yes, 2 items. First, okay, so we've heard from our waterfront engineer, Duncan Malore, that he would recommend that the funds that Portsmouth Water has to pay for mitigation due to their water line construction not be paid to the state, but rather that the Conservation Commission ask that those funds be used for Fox Point shoreline restoration.
That's fine with me. Maybe to mitigate some of that, cost for the hydrants in this town. We're charging us every year.
Well, I don't think you can go for that, Mike. I think it's.
I know, but you don't wanna talk about it. You know, this still irritates the hell out of me.
No, I know, but
Just to make sure
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
keep,
the money in town.
Exactly, I agree with it. That's a good point.
So what do you want?
You want a motion?
that would be great to
So moved.
request the
Conservation Commission to, yes.
But I wanna make sure it's earmarked for the point, not to be used for other items, okay?
Right.
Is that okay
That's a
with you, Mr.
motion.
Chairman?
Second
Is that
it?
okay with you, Paul? Okay,
Second
he
it?
seconded
All in favor?
Aye.
Vote.
And then secondly, I was hoping you could just go into a quick non-public to talk about a legal item. It's follow-up from last week's.
Publicly, I will say, I was in contact with the Air Force about the air show. The 3 of us have been invited. I think, they're pretty clear that we are all 3 declining.
Okay.
They are gonna, they've already designated the Spirit of Newington and the Spirit of Portsmouth. Those are the first 2 planes in.
Right.
The next 10 planes are gonna be dedicated on the day of, one of the days of the air show, and they are to each of the 10 counties of New Hampshire.
Oh, that's nice to know, that's good to know.
So, if you wanna go for that ceremony, it's gonna be a hard time getting in and getting out, so that's up to you. And me personally, I'm gonna,
If you wanna go
cook out in
represent us,
my-
I got no problem with him representing me.
Oh, I'm not representing you or me.
Okay.
I'm gonna.
Is the gate gonna be open over here?
Beg your
Is the
pardon?
gate, is the traffic,
No,
will it be open for citizens
they're
only?
talking
Oh,
about,
sorry, no.
they're talking about closing Arboretum.
Right.
That's the police chief.
To the police.
Yeah.
We haven't got it officially yet, but that's a recommendation for the police.
And
Right.
McIntyre too, I believe.
Can we take a bicycle down there?
No, bikes are not authorized.
Bicycle?
No.
That's a-
Skateboards,
The
roller
air
skates,
show,
then it's
the
not
air
used.
show has locked down.
They didn't do that last time.
Well,
Yeah.
this is not last time. This is this time.
COVID.
They're shutting it down.
But
'Cause I was planning on walking or bicycling over there.
me personally, I'm gonna be at my house for a cookout, and
Yeah.
when I think the air show starts, I'm gonna walk down and sit on the new grass that Barassa just planted. And I'm gonna watch the air show from the end of Hannah
I'm
Lane.
gonna sit in my pool watching it, 'cause they fly right over my head.
Okay,
Well, the reason why I came, I know you're going into a non-public, so the reason why I came, it was because of Eversource, and I was just kind of wondering, what are we doing with that $50,000 check? Is there any update on that?
I forwarded that agreement to John Radigan
Right.
to ask his
I know, you
opinion.
told me that.
I
yeah.
haven't heard back from him.
so
I
wait
know
to
it's
hear
just
from them.
back from
Hopefully, if we
vacation.
get it by next week, we'll act upon it then.
Yeah, okay, I just, and then try to get because the patches that are out there are temporary.
Yeah.
That were put in, and probably good, whether or not you wanna do the other repairs, that's up to you guys, but, I'm glad to see we're getting $25,000 or $30,000 out of that. I think that could go
Right.
to the coffers, so. That's all, I had no idea that this other stuff was coming up.
Of course you did.
You didn't bring your lunch?
Mandated it.
What's that? No, I did it, I was coming here for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have a motion to go on executive session.
Yeah,
Roll call.
149, I'd like to go into executive session, Mr. Chairman, we have a second?
Second. Roll call, Mr. Marconi.
Yes.
Mrs. Blonigan,
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
We'll
Thank
unplug the machine.
Thank you.
Shut the door.